far as Facebook, I've only been in jail one time, actually twice, and I'm proud of that, that happened. So, so who I am, Lanier Family Healthcare, Victory Direct Care, and Oris Vein Center. Those are the three practices that I have in coming. So we're here to talk about natural immunity and COVID-19 and its relationship. And if we have time, we'll talk about, which I think we will, it shouldn't be a problem, talk about the heart and COVID-19 with myocarditis, the side effects from that. So natural immunity, there's two basic responses. There's a humoral response. That's where, let me back up. The phagocytes, as a foreign substance enters the body, the macrophages or the phagocytes grab it, take it in, chew it up, and expose parts of that to the outside of the cell. And that exposed part is seen by the CD4 or the T helper cells. And the T helper cells makes little outpouchings or out to basically signals to other cells. If you go down the cellular response, cytotoxic T cells recognize this and it knows what cells to attack. And it basically attacks and kills the cell. Simple. That's the cellular response. The humoral response, the T helper cells tell the B cells what to do. And the B cells rapidly start making antibodies that go out and try to kill and attach to the foreign substance and bind it together and kill it also. So next, there's two types of immune presentations. You've got the upper airway response, which is mainly IgA mediated. The virus gets into the mucosa of the nose, nasopharynx, and tries to penetrate through the mucosa. And as it does, it stimulates an immune response. The Omicron variant was much more contagious, spread a lot easier, but it has more difficulty penetrating through the mucosa. And so most of the Omicron cases weren't as bad as Delta. People are with, runny nose, sore throat, cough, maybe a little fever, a much milder case. The amount of virus that, the viral load that's present makes a difference in what kind of infection you get. That's one of the reasons I did use ivermectin. It suppresses viral replication. So it makes a bigger viral presentation a much smaller one. So the gastrointestinal tract, the virus can be swallowed. Stimulated immune response with T and B cells in the GI tract. Now it doesn't mean you have to eat it necessarily. If it's still in the nasal mucosa and drains down the back of your throat, that gets swallowed. It still gets to the GI tract. That stimulates an IgG response, which is a little more aggressive and potentially could set off what's called the cytokine storm. That's where your body almost gets an aggressive inflammatory response that gets out of control. And that's why you really want to try to suppress and keep that from happening, because that's what can lead to a lot of the lung damage in patients that end up on the ventilator. Symptoms down this way is high fever, shortness of breath, and inflammation. So now I hope this works. This is a little video here. This is the coronavirus. These are the spike proteins on the outside. These are the ACE receptors that in your body, that's how it gets into the body. It finds those receptors and penetrates through. So it will show how this gets into your body. There is a picture of a phagocyte actually grabbing it, and you'll see it engulf it and then destroy it, and then it presents the spike proteins to the outside of the cell so that other cells recognize what the bad guys are. And at the end, I think it's showing the B cells where it's making antibodies, reproducing rapidly, making antibodies, releasing them into the bloodstream, and at the same time, it has it on the outside of their cells too. There's the phagocyte. And so these are the cytotoxic cells, the blue one here. So it recognizes the antibodies on the outside and then destroys B cells, the plasma cells. making the antibodies and releasing them. All righty. Whew, that worked better than I thought it was. Me and technology do not get along. Things just never seem to work when I want them to. So this is going back to the humoral response with the antibodies. So over here is the initial presentation of the, we'll say coronavirus. And so as the B cells are set up, they're making the antibodies. And within usually about 7 days, you're making a sufficient amount of antibodies to suppress or control the virus. And then using IgG and IgM antibodies. The IgG is the longer term antibody, where IgM is short term. They don't last very long. And so as the infection suppresses, it doesn't go back to zero. There's still some memory B cells present, and they go hide in the bone marrow and stay there and wait for the next time. And so when the next infection, as you can see, that took 0 to 7 days. This is 0 to 3 days and gets a higher level of antibody response. So it really helps to jump on this thing the second time. And to me, this is a real important fact that some of our government agencies ignore. And this is Hidden Falls, again, in Grand Teton National Park. That water was cold. So next, in a journal Nature, they looked, this is a year ago, actually almost a year and a half ago, in 2020, they looked at T cells in individuals and found that a large number of patients had T cells from the coronavirus, the SARS virus, from 2002, 2003. So that's a big thing that everybody was saying, we don't know how long it's going to last. The antibodies aren't going to last very long, and natural infection doesn't work. Taiwan was bragging about how great they did at suppressing COVID-19 when it came out. They didn't do anything different than anybody else did. So why was it really suppressed? A lot of us believe it's because they got hit so hard back in 2002, 2003, that a lot of their population already had those memory B cells sitting waiting for this new coronavirus to show up and jumped on it early. And other studies, part of this study showed the CD4, which, as I showed, the T helper cells, are 90% of the patients at least 6 to 8 months afterwards. So where does that leave us with the vaccine? So now I'm going to start getting ugly. In June of 2021, less than a year ago, Peter Marks, quote, "We do know that immunity after vaccination is better than the immunity after natural infection." Dr. Walensky, the director of the CDC, "Even if you've had the virus," and this aggravates me, "you should get the vaccine 90 days later to get sufficient immunity. Getting the virus alone is not enough." And all this was coming out when they're pushing these mandates, and it just frustrates you. From the current CDC website, the fact, getting a COVID-19 vaccine is safer and more dependable way to build immunity to COVID-19 than getting sick with COVID-19. The only part of that I agree with is to get the immunity to the virus, other than the vaccine, you have to get the infection. Yes, there is some risk with that. And so that's why I would agree that it's safer in that sense only. Yeah, there you go, very little. So the second one, COVID-19 vaccines do not create or cause variants. That's true, it does not do that, but it can help prevent new variants from emerging. No better than, because you still get it, you can still transmit it. And I have an interesting study to show about that in a minute too. So natural immunity, again, versus COVID-19. Spike proteins are these red splotchy looking things here. RNA, viral genome, membrane protein, envelope protein, nucleocapsid protein. The COVID-19 vaccine was made to that alone. They say it may be reacting with another component, but that's it. If you get immunity because you had the virus, there are 22 epitopes that your body reacts to. 22, not one, maybe two, 22. So what does that mean really? It means that what happens if the spike protein changes, like going from Delta to Omicron? That was the big difference, is the spike protein changed. So if the vaccine is designed to a spike protein 2 years ago, How effective is it going to be today when the spike proteins changed? If someone had the infection 2 years ago, they had 22 epitopes that if the spike protein changes completely, one of these other components, your body's going to recognize it as foreign and it's going to attack it. So that's a strong, strong point about natural immunity versus the vaccine. To me, the vaccine is obsolete at this point. Robert Clancy, who is an immunologist down in Australia, I was watching a documentary about him, and it really was kind of scary. You've had the 2 vaccines. They waned going into the Delta variant and became less effective. So we got the booster, which is what's the booster? It's the original vaccine to the spike protein. So they said that that's supposed to help boost that, and it would last 3 to 4 months. The next booster comes along. He said it may last 8, maybe 10 weeks. The next booster may only last 4 to 5 weeks. But what happens with those boosters each time? Anybody ever had allergy shots? If you've had them, we'll say bee stings. You went and got allergy shots to bee stings. We give you a series of little doses of that, and you become less reactive. It doesn't work as much. So what happens after all these booster shots and you get COVID again? Your immunity doesn't even stop. It doesn't do anything. It ignores it. That's devastating. I can't imagine what that infection would look like. It would be short and wouldn't last very long. I'll put it that way. Regeneron, a monoclonal antibody that we were using, designed for the spike protein. It did a great job with the Delta variant. It has been proven Regeneron, the monoclonal antibody, does not work on Omicron. So they admit spike proteins changed enough that this monoclonal antibody won't work. But hey, get that booster. It's contradictory. It doesn't make sense to me. So, natural immunity versus COVID-19. Sorry, CDC and FDA. This is 6 studies that prove natural immunity is better. But then there's another study, one from the CDC. This is January 19th of this year. They produced documentation proving natural immunity is better than the vaccine. And so this is a graph, very, very confusing the way that they did it. But the blue line, if you can't read that, the blue line is unvaccinated people. And this vertical line is not numbers, it's a hazard rate. What the heck's a hazard rate? It's laboratory confirmed COVID-19 cases per 100,000 person days. That helps clear it up completely for me. I'm trying to understand what they're trying to reference. But the reference, I agree that there probably is a greater number of people supposedly getting the vaccine. This is Delta variant. This is from May 30th to November 20th. So this is all Delta. Maybe a little trailing some Alpha or Lambda at the beginning of it. The blue dashed line is vaccinated. They've gotten at least 2 vaccines. The number of cases. This is just cases in California. It's interesting they picked California and New York as the 2 states. If you look way down here, there is a black dashed line and a gray dashed line. Those 2 lines, one of them is the unvaccinated, is the gray one, unvaccinated with a previous infection. The black one is vaccinated with previous infection. Let me give you a close-up. Which one's better? Neither. It's identical. So you're trying to tell me, CDC, that it doesn't matter if you've had the vaccine, it's whether or not you've had the virus. Now, I do want to stress, the people that got to this study, if they've had a previous infection, at least survived that infection. We don't know how many people died from it. And that's a whole different topic trying to get on that. So, and some of the treatment that was done. So this one is for New York. Same time frame, same hazard rate. But again, we've got the top graph is the unvaccinated, no previous infection, vaccinated, no previous infection, and then vaccinated or unvaccinated with previous infection. And again, those are pretty much the same. And even looking at this is hospitalizations back in California. And still, those numbers are pretty much the same. A study done, I'm pretty sure this was an Israeli study, that showed initially, this is during the Delta variant, or changes after the Delta variant, take that back. So if you got the vaccine after the Delta variant, your protection went down 14%, 14 times. Went down, because that's the waning vaccine. The antibodies just don't last. Unless you get that booster, it's gonna boost that alpha variant. But if you got the COVID vaccine virus and no vaccine, you had 25 times the protection. And then if you got both the vaccine and the virus, you had 23 times the vaccine. Why did that go down if the vaccine is so great? And Walensky wants us to get that after having the virus. These questions we must ask. So is this vaccine working 2 years after the pandemic? Love this graph. I love this because, this table. I love this because this is from February of this year to March of this year. It's looking at recent cases. This is all Omicron, all Omicron. So let's start with 18-year-olds old. This is one that presented to the emergency department and got admitted in the hospital. Under 18, 658 cases, 575 were not vaccinated. So a large number of them that end up being hospitalized in that age group were unvaccinated. Let's go to, let's say, the 50 to 59. 601 total cases, 110 unvaccinated. What is that, 20%? Not good at math either, no. 20%, so 80% that got admitted were vaccinated. Again, this is the vaccine trying to treat Omicron with a different spike protein. And they wonder why it's not working. 80 and over. 2,000 cases admitted, only 103 were unvaccinated. And 1,700, almost 1,800 had two shots plus at least one booster. This table, when I saw this, I was astounded. I couldn't believe that there's still any discussion about this at all at this point. So, again, looking at the hospitalizations, at least the CDC came out and admitted this, that 40% of those admitted, 43%, actually weren't there because they had COVID. So that tells me even though they're making these hospitalizations look like they're so bad, 40% of them were there, and if they weren't there because of COVID, it means they tested them after they got there. They didn't treat them, they didn't do anything about them, so it was an insignificant infection. And so, again, and this is even CNN, believe it or not. And so, I wasn't supposed to say anything political. Was that kind of political? No. Okay. So, and this is another graph. COVID, this is deaths. And so, under 18, there were 2. 1 was not vaccinated. 1 was vaccinated. Less than 21 days. I'd like to see the results of that autopsy. There was a kid in North Georgia. I heard this report on WSB News. There's no question this kid died from the coronavirus. 13 years old. Coroner, yes, on my investigation, this child died from the coronavirus. They went on to give the history. His dad went in to wake him up for school and found him dead. That's not how you die from the coronavirus. It's a slower, progressive process. That's how you die from the vaccine. And so again, 80 and over, 1,500 cases, almost 1,600 deaths, only 102 of them are unvaccinated. 1,200 of them had at least 3 doses of the vaccine. So there were also comments made about and this wasn't that long ago, unless you were hospitalized, you didn't make enough antibodies to protect you against a future infection. Well, here's some numbers. Symptomatic previous infection gives you 93% protection. Asymptomatic protection, still 86%. That's pretty darn good. So, should I get another booster? It's the same original vaccine, making antibodies to a 2-year-old spike protein. If a patient walked into my office and said, I would like to get the flu vaccine, I says, perfect. I've got last year's flu vaccine. It's 30% off. Are you going to accept that? Please say no. It doesn't make sense to me. If it's outdated, it's outdated. The science needs to keep up with the virus. If you get a booster every 4 months, and this is what I mentioned earlier, T suppressor cells can actually lower your immune response to the virus. So they said, well, it all has to do with your age. Well, you're right. Older folks don't necessarily build as big immune response to the vaccine, but they've been shown to build as good a response to younger folks to the virus. That's a moose. My daughter took that picture in Cascade Canyon. He was actually on this side of the river, and she just got scared out of her wits and was able to get a picture of him walking away. I thought that was pretty cool. What about this type of vaccine? A genetic or messenger RNA vaccine versus an antigen-based attenuated or dead. Attenuated means basically we take, like the flu vaccine, we take the flu, we break its legs, and then we inject it into you. It can't hurt you, but yet the body parts are there for you to make the antibodies too. With the genetic vaccine, we inject that into you, just like the video I showed. It showed the virus going in and showing its RNA going through and replicating. We don't know where it goes. We can't control where it goes. We can't control how much it makes the spike proteins. And that's where a lot of the problems are. And I'll be honest, I'm scared of this vaccine. And I've argued with other doctors about it. It's safe, it's clearly safe. I says, what about next year? What's going to be safe? I said, you don't know that. We don't know that. So, but with the antigen or the protein that we inject, like the flu shot, it's not going to cause the flu. It might make you feel like you got the flu, but that's just your immune response responding. But it will not cause more flu. It will not destroy cells because it gets in your body unless you're allergic to one of the components of it. So there's two approaches to COVID-19 treatment. The CDC, the FDA, and our current president and administration say treat the entire population the same way. And that's what a lot of the people, this herd immunity type concept. If we can just get everybody vaccinated, then, or at least 80% of the people vaccinated, it's gonna stop the spread. Well, the theory was that if you got vaccinated, you wouldn't spread the virus. That's been proven wrong. And so the whole theory of this herd immunity with the vaccine did not work. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I for certain people, the diabetics, the heart disease, anybody that's got risk to them, you know what? And I'll sit down with my patient. Actually, this is my next topic here. The other thing, which this really I feel is very true, we're smarter than the rest of you, so do as you're told or else. And that's what I felt like with the media they were doing. They were scaring people into getting it. And even, doctors, the way they responded to this, I'm still amazed. And I felt like, am I wrong or right? And I feel now the evidence is starting to support at least where my stance has been. So my version is treat each patient individually. And what I like to do is sit down with a patient and say, okay, you're an insulin-dependent diabetic, you've got lung disease, you've had a heart attack, it might be a good idea that you get the vaccine. But I'm going to leave it to them. I'm not a big hand holder. I'm going to present you the facts and the information. I'm going to give my opinion if you want it. That's my job. Risk versus benefits, present that to you, not to tell you. I had patients come to me and said they came to me as a new patient because their last doctor told them, stupid is as stupid does. How do you say that to a patient? But that's what they said when the patient refused to get the vaccine. So, like I said, I'm not anti-vax, I'm pro-education. A patient should be able to make their own choice, not be mandated to them.